This week we're going to spend some time looking at video meeting tools, tools which you might hear described as synchronous tools, which literally means at the same time. This is in contrast to an asynchronous tool, something like email, where I might send an email and at some point in the future, hopefully somebody might reply with a message. So it's not at the same time, but synchronous tools tend to happen at the same time. Now, if you've been paying any attention at all to the media about how communities, including schools, are responding to the limitations that are imposed on most people due to the current global situation, then you can't really help but notice that some examples of use of these tools haven't gone particularly well. Now, there is a not particularly positive or encouraging saying that your purpose in life might be simply to serve as a warning to others. I'm sure that doesn't apply to you, but those of us who are in education and are looking to use these tools have got plenty of warnings to learn from. Now, in this series, we've gone on and on and on about outcomes. We'll probably continue to do that because I think it's really a powerful question to constantly ask, to what end are we using this tool? To what end are we undertaking this particular activity? And what's it going to end up with? What's the outcome going to be? Now, in the cases that have made the news, I would say that they've probably made the news for the wrong reasons, for a combination of factors. Now, the first one, there is a pressure from schools. Your employer might be pressurizing you to deliver some sort of teaching online, sometimes from parents and often from politicians and wider society. This reaction that said, well, schools are closed, but the learning continues, or teaching will continue. Now, because most of us who've been teaching have come from an environment where we're in a classroom in front of a sea of faces, most of whom we can eyeball and at least get eye contact with at some point during the lesson, we tend to then translate that into, well, I need something that replicates that, which is why many people, their first thought when it comes to I need to teach a lesson online, you come to a synchronous video meeting tool. Now, that is, I think, combined with a second factor, which is that there are plenty of examples on social media and possibly been sent to you by emails via your principal or head teacher, telling you, oh, look, this school is doing this really well. Why can't we do this? And so you go and read the case study or the write-up, and it looks like a teacher like you, and they're using a particular tool. And the difference between you and them is the tool. So you just grab on whatever they've got. You don't necessarily ask, how much time have they spent getting this right? How many times did they get it wrong? What support does the school have? How well resourced are they? Is this person been given special dispensation to really think about this for 6 months before this case study came out? But we tend to think it's all about the tool. That's the difference between them and myself. And we don't necessarily, therefore, go and ask the slightly more fundamental questions about any tool that they might be using. For example, will a student need to install an app or a plugin in order to take part using this tool? Does this require them to have an account in order to take part in a meeting? Now, if you're using Google Classroom or something like Microsoft Teams, and that's through your school, your students probably have an account, so you're halfway there. How can I ensure that any meeting I have with students is private? Now, is it because I am the organiser and I've sent out invitations to a list of students that only they can take part? Or is it a more open meeting and I have to attach a password? How do enhanced privileges work? If I'm the meeting organiser, does that give me the right to mute everybody and remove people or allow certain people to share their screen? Or do we all come in as peers? Because that's a very different situation. Or is it even the first person in gets the ability to be the meeting host? That's something you need to be very aware of. Does this tool in particular offer recording? If so, what is captured? Are private conversations captured in that recording? That's a really important thing to know because it will inform how you use it to interact with individual students. I want to think about 2 tips that you can take away before your next meeting with students. And I would say that if you've had meetings before, do this before your next meeting. And if you've not had meetings before, do this before your next meeting. The first thing I'd say is don't meet with students next. Instead, meet with your colleagues. Use the same tool you will use to meet with students, to meet with your colleagues. You will have a professional conversation about how you're feeling, whether you can get hand sanitizer, how your teaching's going, etc. But say there's 6 of you doing the same sort of thing across your city or your state or whatever. One of you should take the chair for the next meeting and organise the meeting. Send out the invitations. Make sure that people are attending. When people come into the actual live meeting, you should be the one managing the meeting, giving people a microphone, giving everybody the microphone, taking it away, doing those sorts of things. All the time that you're having that professional conversation about how your day's been and how your week's been, your colleagues, if two people are having a conversation on camera, everyone else should be just randomly clicking to see what they can do. And maybe they might pipe up and say, oh, did you know, while you two were talking, us three were having a private conversation that nobody knew about. That's a really important thing to understand before you start going into these environments. It's not really much use to go in and say, well, I tested the environment on my own and it all looked very nice, because that's not a real use of it being in a room on your own. The second one I'd say is make sure you learn from every single meeting you have, whether it's with students or with your colleagues. So take shared notes. So use an example of Google Classroom. If you're using Google Classroom, create a shared Google document, and after every single meeting, those initial ones you have with your colleagues, everybody write down what came away in that shared notebook. After your first meeting with students, write down what went brilliantly, what was okay, and what, quite frankly, you'd never do again. And before your colleague goes to their next meeting, they can look at what you experienced, see what worked, what might have worked, and they might say, well, actually, I know his students, and actually I could use that tool with my students, I just need to modify it. And then maybe they write down how they changed it and how it improved things, or didn't. But you can really start to learn from one another, with the implied outcome that you don't want to be a warning to others, but actually you can start to very quickly build practice, not just iteratively by looking at your own practice, but by learning what other people do as well. Do take the opportunity to share practice, and if you do that, you'll have already started to form a small local professional learning community in your school, across your city, across your state, however you are dispersed. And I think we don't yet appreciate how valuable those small local communities of practice, communities of learning, are going to be as we all learn to teach online in the next few weeks and months.